She was 19 years old and technically homeless when she bought a $10 storage unit. And what she discovered taped to the inside of its metal lid would change not just her future, but her entire understanding of the past. If you've ever felt like the world has forgotten you, or that your story was already written by someone else, then I need you to stick with me for this. Hit that subscribe button, because we're building a community here for people who know what it's like to fight for a second chance. The day it happened was a Tuesday in October. The sky was the color of a dirty dishcloth, and the wind had a special kind of cruelty to it, the kind that finds the one gap in your collar and lives there. I had aged out of the system exactly 4 months and 11 days prior. For months of couch surfing, of sleeping in 24-hour diners until the manager noticed, of becoming an expert in the architecture of public library bathrooms. My entire worldly possessions fit into a single, worn-out backpack that smelled faintly of damp fabric and cheap coffee. In my pocket, I had a crumpled $20 bill and a handful of coins. That was it. That was the sum total of my advance. I'd heard about storage auctions from a guy named Sal who ran a falafel cart downtown. He'd told me stories, his eyes gleaming over the steam rising from the fryer. Sometimes, kid, you find treasures, tools, furniture. Sometimes you find junk. But for 10, 20 bucks, it's a lottery ticket. For me, it wasn't about treasure. It was about the desperate, clawing hope of finding something, anything that could be sold for 50 bucks. 50 bucks was a week in a hostel. It was a week of not having to check the weather forecast with a sense of existential dread. The facility was on the industrial edge of town, a place of rust-stained metal and gravel lots. A row of identical roll-up doors stared back at me like blank, metallic faces. The auctioneer was a fast-talking man with a stained parka and a voice that sounded like gravel being churned in a cement mixer. He didn't cut the locks. He just popped them with a set of bolt cutters, the snap echoing in the cold air. He'd give us 5 minutes to peer inside from the doorway. No entering, no touching. Then the bidding would start. The first few units were exactly what Sal had warned me about. Mountains of black trash bags, leaking a suspicious fluid. A single, sad-looking mattress, stained with things I didn't want to think about. Broken particle board furniture that looked like it would turn to dust if you looked at it too hard. The bids were low, but not low enough for me. $25. $40. Gone. Then they cut the lock on Unit 237. The door rolled up with a groan of protest, revealing a space that was different. It wasn't packed to the ceiling. It was neat. There were a few cardboard boxes, sealed with yellowing tape and stacked carefully against one wall. A floor lamp with a crooked, floral shade stood in the corner like a tired old woman. There was a wooden rocking chair, its varnish peeling, and a small, dark wood trunk with tarnished brass fittings. It wasn't a treasure trove. It looked like the last remnants of a life packed away with care, not a dumpster filled in a hurry. It looked sad. The auctioneer started his patter. All right, folks, what am I bid for this lovely collection of memories? We'll start me at $50. $50 for the lot. Silence. The other bidders, a handful of grizzled men who looked like they did this for a living, just shook their heads and shuffled their feet. They could smell it. No quick flip. No power tools or electronics. This was personal history, and personal history doesn't have much of a resale value. 25, the auctioneer pleaded, his voice losing its rhythm. Give me 25. More silence. I could feel my heart thumping against my ribs. It felt different. It felt quiet. I don't know why, but I felt a pull, a strange sense of recognition, though I'd never seen any of it before in my life. All right, last chance. $10. Who's got 10? We got to clear it out today. My hand, almost of its own accord, went up. My voice was a squeak. 10. The auctioneer's eyes locked onto mine. A flicker of surprise, maybe pity. Sold, he barked, slamming his hand against the metal door frame. To the young lady for $10. I walked forward in a daze, the cold forgotten. I handed him my crumpled 20, and he gave me a 10 back, along with a bright yellow padlock still in its plastic packaging. It's yours till the end of the month, kid. Get it cleared out. I stood there for a long time after they all left, just staring at the open door of Unit 237. The silence of the place settled around me. It was just me and someone else's ghosts. My ghosts. I just didn't know it yet. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of dust and cold metal, and stepped inside. The first thing I did was close the heavy metal door behind me, shutting out the wind and the rest of the world. The darkness was absolute for a moment, thick and suffocating. I fumbled for my phone, its screen a pale, ghostly light in the enclosed space. The air was still and smelled of old paper, cedar, and something else, something faint and floral like dried lavender. I started with the boxes. They were heavy, sealed with brittle packing tape that cracked under my fingernails. The first one was full of books, hardcover novels with cracked spines and dog-eared pages. I ran my fingers over the titles. Steinbeck, Morrison, a book of poetry by Mary Oliver. Someone had loved these. Tucked inside one of them was a pressed flower, a pansy, its color faded to a ghostly purple. It felt like an intrusion, like reading someone's diary. There was nothing of value here, not in the way Sal meant. The second box held kitchen things. Mismatched plates with tiny blue flowers around the rim. A set of heavy, tarnished silverware. A chipped ceramic mug that said, "World's Best Grandma." I felt a pang in my chest, a hollow ache that was always there, just beneath the surface. My own grandmother, Elena, had disappeared from my life when I was 7, right after my parents died. The social workers said she'd relinquished her rights. That was the term they used. It sounded so clean, so clinical, like returning a library book. For years, that word had been a brand on my heart. Relinquished, abandoned, thrown away. I put the mug down gently, as if it might break. I spent what felt like hours sifting through the remnants of this anonymous life. Old photo albums filled with faded pictures of people I didn't know, smiling at birthday parties and beach trips. A box of vinyl records, mostly jazz and soul. Billie Holiday, Nina Simone. A small box of sewing supplies, needles still stuck in a red tomato-shaped pincushion. It was all so ordinary, so achingly normal, and completely, utterly worthless to a reseller. A cold wave of despair washed over me. I'd spent half my money on garbage, sentimental garbage. I sank down onto the dusty floor, my back against the cold metal wall, and just let the hopelessness settle in. This was it. Another dead end. Another stupid, hopeful gamble that had led nowhere. I was an idiot. A desperate, broke idiot sitting in a $10 tomb. I was about to just get up, walk out, and leave the stupid yellow lock on the door for the facility to deal with, when my eyes drifted upwards. The ceiling of a unit was corrugated metal, just like the walls. And there, right in the center, was a small, dark rectangle that broke the pattern of dust and shadows. It looked like tape. A piece of duct tape, old and gray, holding a thick manila envelope against the metal. It was almost perfectly centered, placed with an intention that stood out from the gentle chaos below. My breath caught in my throat. Why would anyone tape something to the ceiling? It was the one place you'd never think to look. You'd clear out the floor, empty the boxes, and never once glance straight up. I had to drag one of the heavier boxes to the middle of the unit to stand on. It groaned under my weight, but it held. Reaching up, my fingers brushed against the envelope. It was stiff with age. The tape was stubborn, fused to the metal by years of temperature changes. I had to peel it back slowly, carefully, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The sound of the tape ripping free was obscenely loud in the silent unit. Finally, it came loose. I stepped down from the box, holding the envelope in my hands. It was heavy, thicker than I expected. There was no name on it, no address. Just a single word, written in a familiar, elegant cursive that made the air rush out of my lungs. Maya. My name. My hand started to shake, a tremor that began in my fingertips and spread through my whole body. It couldn't be. It was impossible. The handwriting. I'd only seen on a few birthday cards from when I was very, very young, cards I kept tucked away in a Ziploc bag at the bottom of my backpack. It was my grandmother's handwriting. Elena's. I sank back down to the floor, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. With trembling fingers, I tore open the flap. Inside, there were 3 things. A small, old-fashioned key, the kind with a round, ornate top. A folded business card for a lawyer in a town I'd never heard of, Havenwood, and a thick sheaf of papers folded in half. A letter. I unfolded the pages. The same beautiful, looping script filled the paper, line after line. My dearest Maya, it began. If you are reading this, then several things have happened. First, you have turned 19. Second, I am gone. And third, you have found your way here, to this ridiculous metal box full of my old things. I am so sorry, my love. I am sorry for all of it. I had to stop reading. A sob tore its way out of my chest, raw and ragged. I pressed my fist to my mouth, trying to stifle the sound. After all these years, after 12 years of silence, of believing I was nothing to her, here she was. Her voice, on a page, speaking to me from the grave. I cried then. I cried for the little girl who waited by the window for a grandmother who never came back. I cried for the teenager who navigated the foster system alone, convinced she was unlovable. And I cried for the young woman I was now, sitting in the dark, holding a ghost in her hands. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where the entire foundation of your life, the story you've told yourself about who you are, just cracks open? If this is hitting you, if you know what it's like to have your world turned upside down by a single discovery, I want you to know you're not alone. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to rewrite your own past, because that's what was happening to me. This wasn't just a letter. It was an earthquake. After a while, the tears slowed. I wiped my face with the dusty sleeve of my jacket and forced myself to keep reading, my phone's light illuminating the pages. I know you must hate me, the letter continued. They told you I abandoned you. I know they did. It was the only way. Maya, your father, he was a good man in many ways, but he made a terrible mistake long before you were born. He got involved with some very dangerous people. He borrowed money he couldn't repay. When he and your mother died, that debt didn't die with them. It fell to me as your guardian, and by extension, it would have fallen to you. My mind reeled. Dangerous people? Debt? This wasn't the story I knew. The story I knew was a simple, tragic car accident. End of story. They weren't bankers, my love. They were predators. They would have taken everything. Our house, the small savings I had for you. And when that wasn't enough, they would have found a way to own you, to make you pay for the rest of your life. I couldn't let that happen. So I made a choice. I had to make it look like I had nothing. I had to make it look like I had walked away from everything, including you. It was the most difficult thing I have ever done. It broke my heart every single day for the rest of my life. The words blurred through a fresh wave of tears. She hadn't abandoned me. She had protected me. The narrative of my life, the one built on the cold, hard fact of my abandonment, was a lie. It was a shield she had built for me, and she had let me hate her for it. I sold the house in the city and paid off as much as I could, but it wasn't enough. So I disappeared. I used the last of the money to buy a small, forgotten property way out in the country under a different name, a place no one would ever look for. It's not much, but it's paid for. It's safe, and it's yours. This storage unit was my insurance policy. I paid it up for years in advance, and then I set it to default on the month of your 19th birthday. I hoped, I prayed that somehow you would find it, that you would be curious enough, or desperate enough, to bid on an old woman's forgotten junk. Desperate. She had counted on me being desperate. The thought was both brilliant and devastating. She had known the system would spit me out with nothing. She had anticipated my poverty, my hopelessness, and used it as a beacon to guide me home. The key is to the front door. The business card is from Mr. Abernathy. He's the only other person who knows the truth. He's a good man. He holds the deed and the title, all legally transferred to you on your 18th birthday, held in trust. He will help you. The address is on the back of his card. Go there, Maya. Go home. The letter ended with a final, heart-wrenching paragraph. Forgive me for the life you've had to live. I hope one day you'll understand that I gave up my life with you so that you could have a life at all. I have loved you every minute of every day. Always. Your grandma, Elena. I sat there in the silence of the storage unit for a long, long time, the letter clutched in my hand. The cold of the concrete floor seeped into my bones, but I didn't feel it. A fire was burning inside me, a complex blaze of grief and rage and a profound, earth-shattering love. Everything I thought was true was false. Every person I thought was an enemy was a protector. I wasn't abandoned. I was saved. The next morning, I sold the rocking chair and the vinyl records to one of the grizzled bidders from the day before for $60. It felt like a betrayal, but I needed the money for a bus ticket. I kept the world's best grandma mug. I packed it carefully in my backpack, wrapped in an old sweater from one of the boxes. Then, with the key in my pocket and Mr. Abernathy's address clutched in my hand, I locked up Unit 237 and walked away, not looking back. I was leaving my old life behind in that metal box, right alongside my grandmother's ghosts. The bus ride to Havenwood took 7 hours. I watched the city's skyline dissolve into sprawling suburbs, which then bled into flat, empty farmland. The world outside the window grew greener, quieter. Havenwood wasn't so much a town as a crossroads with a post office and a gas station. Mr. Abernathy's law office was a small brick building on the main street, with faded gold lettering on the window. A bell chimed as I pushed the door open. The man who looked up from behind a massive oak desk was old, with kind eyes and a fringe of white hair around a bald head. He looked like a storybook lawyer. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice gentle. I swallowed, my throat dry. "My name is Maya Vance. I think you've been expecting me." I held out the business card. His expression softened instantly. He stood up and rounded the desk, his hand outstretched. "Miss Vance, yes, I have been, for a very long time. Please sit down." He listened patiently as I told him everything, my voice cracking as I recounted finding the letter. He just nodded, his gaze full of a sad understanding. When I was finished, he steepled his fingers and looked at me. "Your grandmother was one of the strongest, smartest women I have ever met," he said quietly. "Everything you read in that letter is true. She came to me over 10 years ago with a plan that was, forgive me, completely insane. But worked." He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a thick file folder. "This is all for you." Inside were legal documents, a deed, a property title, all in my name. He explained the legalities, the trust she had set up, the way she had systematically erased herself to protect me. "The men your father owed money to," he said, his voice dropping, "were a real estate development firm, a predatory one. They used loan sharking tactics to acquire land. Your family's old home was on a prime piece of city real estate. They didn't just want the money, they wanted the land. When Elena sold it to pay them off, she outsmarted them, but they didn't forget. They saw her, and by extension you, as a loose end, an antagonistic force that wasn't a person, but a system, a company with a logo and a letterhead. It was somehow more terrifying than a single villain, a faceless, institutional greed that had shaped my entire life. Elena knew they'd watch you in the system," Mr. Abernathy continued. "They would have been waiting for you to turn 18, to see if she'd left you anything they could seize. Her disappearing act, her apparent abandonment of you, was your protection. It made you look worthless in their eyes, an orphan with nothing. There was nothing for them to take. It all clicked into place. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She had to wound me to save me. She had to let the world see me as abandoned trash so the real wolves would pass me by." "The property?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Where is it?" "About 5 miles out of town," he said, pulling a map from the folder. "It's not much. An old farmhouse on a few acres of land. It needs work, a lot of work. Elena bought it for a pittance and spent the last decade of her life fixing it up as best she could, living on her small pension. She wanted to leave you with something that was truly yours, something no one could ever take away." He paused, his gaze meeting mine. "There's one more thing you need to know. The company, Vantage Development, is still around. They've recently started buying up land out here, trying to get enough for a new resort. The pressure is on. People are selling. They don't know you exist, but if they find out who you are and that you own a piece of land right in the middle of their desired plot, they'll come for you, Maya." He let that sink in. The threat wasn't over. It had just changed shape. "They'll offer you money," he said, his voice firm. "Probably a lot of it. Enough to make you forget all this and start a new life anywhere you want. It will be the easy choice. No one would blame you for taking it. I looked down at the key in my hand. It felt heavy, weighted with the sacrifice of a woman I barely knew, but who had loved me enough to orchestrate this impossible plan across a decade. Sell it? Sell the one thing she had fought to give me? The one piece of the world that was mine? No, I said, the word coming out stronger than I expected. I'm not selling. A slow smile spread across Mr. Abernathy's face. I had a feeling your grandmother's granddaughter would say that. He gave me the keys to an old, beat-up pickup truck that had belonged to Elena, along with a file and a box of her personal effects he'd been holding. The drive out to the property was a blur of green trees and blue sky. I followed the hand-drawn map, turning off the paved road onto a long gravel driveway overgrown with weeds. And then I saw it. The farmhouse was small, a simple two-story white building with a sagging front porch and peeling paint. The windows were dark and empty. A massive oak tree stood guard in the front yard, its branches reaching out like protective arms. It was neglected, forgotten, and undeniably beautiful. It was, as Mr. Abernathy had said, not much. But as I stood there, looking at it, I felt a sense of peace settle over me for the first time in my life. I walked up the creaking wooden steps and put the old key in the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. The door swung open into a dusty entryway. Sunlight streamed through the dirty windows, illuminating swirling dust motes in the air. The house smelled like my grandmother's storage unit, old wood, lavender, and thyme. The furniture was sparse and simple, covered in white sheets like sleeping ghosts. In the living room, there was a fireplace, and on the mantelpiece, there was a single, framed photograph. It was of a young woman with kind eyes and the same cursive handwriting smile, holding a baby. My grandmother and me. Tucked into the corner of the frame was another pressed pansy. I spent the next few weeks just being there. I explored every room, every closet, every dusty corner. I found her books on the shelves, her chipped teacups in the kitchen. In a chest at the foot of her bed, I found my old baby clothes, washed and neatly folded. I found my childish drawings, saved and treasured. Evidence of her love was everywhere, a quiet testament that screamed louder than 12 years of silence. The work was overwhelming. The roof leaked. The plumbing was a mystery. The fields were overgrown. Every day presented a new, impossible challenge. There were moments of profound despair, where I'd sit on the porch and just stare at the mountain of work ahead of me, convinced I couldn't do it. The money from the sale of the rocking chair and records was long gone. I was broke again, but this time I wasn't homeless. I was just home. I got a job at the local diner, washing dishes and waiting tables. The owner, a woman named Carol with a loud laugh and a no-nonsense attitude, took a liking to me. The locals were wary at first, another outsider. But slowly, they started to talk to me. An old farmer named George gave me advice on how to fix the fence line. A woman from the church brought over a casserole. They were small gestures, tiny threads of connection, but they began to weave a safety net I'd never had before. I was becoming part of a place. About a month after I'd moved in, a sleek black car rolled up my driveway. A man in an expensive suit got out, his city shoes crunching on the gravel. He represented Vantage Development. He was smooth, charming, and his smile never reached his eyes. He stood on my porch, looked at my peeling paint and overgrown yard with a faint air of disgust, and made his offer. It was a staggering amount of money, more money than I had ever imagined seeing in my life. Enough to buy a new car, a condo in the city, a college education, everything. He laid out a vision of a luxury resort, of jobs and prosperity for Havenwood. He made my small, broken-down farm seem like a selfish obstacle to progress. "You're a smart girl, Maya," he said, his voice like silk. "You've been through a lot. You deserve an easy life. Take the money. Let this all be someone else's problem." I thought about it. I really did. I thought about the leaking roof and the cold winter that was coming. I thought about my empty bank account and the constant, grinding exhaustion. Taking the money was the logical choice. It was the easy way out. Then I thought about my grandmother living out her last years alone in this house, patching the roof and tending her small garden, all to give me this one thing. this one piece of ground that was safe. I thought about the words she'd written on the envelope. Maya, not occupant, not to whom it may concern. My name, my inheritance wasn't the land or the house. It was the choice to fight for something. I looked the man in the eye. This place isn't for sale, I told him. His smile vanished. The charm evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard glare. You're making a mistake, he said. No, I replied, my voice steady. For the first time in my life, I think I'm making a choice. He left. I knew it wasn't the end. Mr. Abernathy had warned me they would play dirty. There would be legal challenges, pressure, intimidation. The fight was just beginning. But as I watched his car disappear down the driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust, I wasn't afraid. I felt a strength I never knew I had, a resilience forged in the lonely corridors of the foster care system and tempered by the quiet love of a woman I was only just getting to know. I went back inside and picked up the world's best grandma mug. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the porch steps, watching the sun set over my fields. The house was old, the work was hard, and the future was uncertain. But it was mine. Every broken shutter, every overgrown weed, every peeling board was mine. My grandmother hadn't just left me a house. She had left me a home. She had left me a purpose. The journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. I had to learn how to be a landowner, how to fix a faucet, how to stand up to a corporate giant. I had to learn how to accept the help of my new community, how to build a life from the foundation of sacrifice someone else had laid for me. But sitting there, on that sagging porch, I knew I was going to be okay. I had survived being relinquished. I could survive this. This story, my story, isn't really about finding a hidden treasure in a storage unit. It's about what inheritance truly means. It's not always about money or property. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance is a second chance. It's the story of our past, reframed not as a tragedy of abandonment, but as a testament to a love so fierce it was willing to be misunderstood. It's the strength you didn't know you had, a gift from someone who believed in you even when you couldn't believe in yourself. And that's a lesson I want to share with all of you. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. It means the world to me. My journey of rebuilding this farm, of fighting for my home, and of honoring my grandmother's memory is ongoing. If you want to follow along, to be a part of this community we're building for people who fight back, who find hope in the darkness, then please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. But more than that, I want to hear from you. What did this story teach you about family, about sacrifice, or about the meaning of home? Drop a comment below and share a piece of your own story. I promise you, I read every single one, because every story matters. Every fight for a second chance is a story worth telling. Thank you for being here. You're not alone.